Augustine down towards Daytona Beach. Tropical storm watches there, as there is still the possibility for tropical storm conditions in those zones. What's going on right now? You can see Tampa, 15-mile-per-hour winds with gusts close to 30. At times, we've seen that get up over 30 miles per hour. Fort Myers is up over 30 with your gusts. And look at Naples, one of the stronger wind gusts showing up right now. 37-mile-per-hour wind gusts showing up. So very, very close to tropical storm force in that area. And again, we'll be watching more of those winds staying up here as we work our way through this afternoon and into our evening hours there. Now, the tropical downpours, we've seen that here across the Sunshine State. Other areas may try to get involved in that too. Colleen?
Yeah, Alex, misery likes company. So Florida isn't the only state getting downpours of tropical moisture. Squeezed between a high pressure system in the Atlantic and an oncoming cold front, heavy rain is falling across the southeast as well as up into the mid-Atlantic. Flood alerts active in the Carolinas and Virginia with the rain already falling. So some gray skies coming over the eastern half of the U.S. And those tropical downpours are going to continue as we head through today as well as into tomorrow. A lot of tropical moisture getting pumped up into these areas and then interacting with our very strong cold front that's been sweeping across the nation. So here's a look at our flood alerts. Flood watches there across Asheville, Boone, also into Charlotte, and then flash flood watches across the coastline there of the Outer Banks as well as getting into the D.C. area. So through tomorrow morning, these are the spots we could see some flooding, especially as you get into some of those higher elevations, squeezing out even more rain, just wringing it out like a wet towel here for a lot of folks. So from Charlotte up through our nation's capital, you got to be on alert as we head through tomorrow morning that you may encounter some flooding issues, as well as maybe even encountering some severe thunderstorms from Greensboro all the way up through Roanoke, Raleigh included in this. We could have some unruly storms embedded with all of these tropical downpours. Now, here's what's going on. There's that front. We were talking about those record high temperatures across parts of the eastern half of the U.S. Behind it, we've had snow, we've had rain. This guy is very powerful, and we have a lot of moisture for this front to tap into. And that's what happens when you have that lift and that moisture involved. You get the ingredients together. You get a radar that looks like this, just showers and thunderstorms all across the area. And you guessed it, it's going to be rinse and repeat as we head through the rest of this afternoon. And then look how this front continues to squeeze out so much of that rain as we get up into the mid-Atlantic as we head into Thursday morning and into Thursday afternoon. So a lot to come. Eta is causing a lot of trouble for much of the East Coast.
New video into us now and showing you what Eta is doing along Florida's western Gulf Coast. And you see the trees, those trees are swaying around there in those winds. Waves also kicking up. Now, this is a band from Eta pushed over the St. Petersburg area, and that's what we can get with those bands of rain coming on by. They bring in a burst of some heavy rain, some gusty winds, and then you see things improve, and then another band tries to swing on by. So that's essentially what we'll see here as we work our way through the rest of this evening and into tonight as it continues to close in on the West Coast. Here's a look at things here for us on the West Coast. Naples showing you here on a pier. You got some folks, some curious folks out and about there checking out things here in the waters. Don't see too many people getting out into it, which is good news. Maybe a surfer trying to get out into that water. But got to be careful getting in it. We got the rip current risk that's going to be on the higher side here for us, and certainly don't want to be caught in that mess at this point. Gusts are getting up around 36 miles per hour there for you in Naples, so approaching tropical storm force. Now, we do have hurricane watches here for us along the West Coast, the west central areas, I should say. And yeah, there's still the possibility, the potential for hurricane conditions, although I would say not likely. Can't rule it out here anywhere you see that orange showing up. But I'd say more likely would be the tropical storm conditions. In fact, that is what is anticipated and expected, where you see that red from Cedar Key back over towards Ocala and then moving southbound to just south of Port Charlotte. And don't forget here, even on the East Coast, tropical storm watches in place there as tropical storm conditions are possible in those areas. So yeah, as this thing moves in that general direction, we will be watching again those conditions move downhill with the stronger gusty winds. Now should continue to weaken, but still bringing some stronger winds in those areas. So here's that projected path, official path from the National Hurricane Center, moving north and eastbound. Now by tomorrow, somewhere in this zone, tomorrow morning, somewhere in this area, as right now being forecast to be a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Now, could it be weaker than that? That is certainly a possibility, and indications are that that may be the case. But I'd certainly say be prepared for a system to be packing 65-mile-per-hour winds. certainly enough to cause some issues when it comes to power outages. But the good news is this thing is going to be moving fairly quickly. It's not going to hang around, stall out, dump a ton of rain in these areas and strong winds. It will be weakening and moving quickly. So that is certainly the best scenario when it comes to these tropical systems. By the time we get to tomorrow evening, essentially beginning to emerge out over the open waters of the Atlantic and then zipping away from there and moving away from the southeast coast. So there's the picture of it. Again, the latest stats, 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm with central pressure at 990. We've seen that come up. It was around 983, and we see those pressures start to rise. That's oftentimes a sign that you're talking about a system that is weakening. North-northeast movement at 10 miles per hour. That's what we're seeing. Most of the worst weather, basically right in that zone on the east side. On the west side, not a whole lot to go with there. We've got a lot of dry air that's really been impacting that area, and some of that's getting entrained into the system, which is allowing it to, again, spin down just a bit. But that does not mean we won't be finding some impacts, and we're seeing that now, again, with some of those winds that are on the gusty side. Tampa right now, you're seeing winds close to 30 in terms of the gusts, but your sustained winds are right around 15. Again, as we watch the center try to get closer and closer, we may see those winds pick up a little more. We're seeing it right now in Fort Myers. You're now up over 30 miles per hour with your winds, and down towards Naples, upper 30s, 37-mile-per-hour wind gusts there. So we are knocking on the door of tropical storm force wind gusts in Naples, while Key West, even again, far away from the center is way over here. Well away from that, you're still talking winds sustained at 20 with gusts right around 25 miles per hour. So a lot of areas will be feeling the impacts, fast-moving system, picking up that speed, but again, seeing the intensity coming down, which is, again, a much better scenario than a system that is picking up steam in terms of the intensity as it's moving inland. Colleen?
And Alex, unfortunately, some of the areas of South Florida that already saw what Eta brought earlier this week are still dealing with rain. And so with the heavy rain swamping places that just didn't need it, we had all the incredible video and photos that we saw, especially out of Fort Lauderdale, as we had homes flooded, neighborhood streets flooded. Now, look at this. We have some stats from Fort Lauderdale. Now, this is what a foot or more of rain can do. This was just yesterday in Fort Lauderdale. Now, before Eta arrived, Fort Lauderdale had already seen 21 inches of surplus for the year. And now that surplus has bulged and it's close to 29 inches of rain. All of Eta's rain has the neighborhood struggling. Jen Carfagna shows us how people are doing.
Getting to work can mean getting wet.
I have 18 inches of water all the way around my house. I can't even move my truck.
The Melrose Park neighborhood, a working class area of Fort Lauderdale, underwater. 80-year-old Evelyn Henry has lived in Melrose Park 3 decades. Eta pushing knee-deep floodwaters inside her house.
3 weeks ago, it was flooded, the water up to the door, but it didn't come inside the house like it is today.
The city deploying an army of vacuum trucks to suck up floodwaters and haul them away. But they did little to clear streets. Uber Eats driver Harmony Peterson can't deliver food. Her small sedan can't handle the high water.
It was good yesterday like it's good now, but then it started pouring again overnight, and you just can't call it.
Standing water, damaging vehicles. Marky White making repairs.
Water get in between electrical stuff, car won't start, jam engine, So I'm here as a rescue team right now.
I drive a Pacifica because my kids are winners, and winners deserve the best. These Uconnect theater screens.
And welcome back to Weather Center Live. Want to take a live look in St. Petersburg. Look at the rain coming down the angry seas as they are bracing for Tropical Storm Eta. They've already had some wind gusts over 30 miles an hour, and that's going to continue, unfortunately, to increase in the coming hours, especially as we head through tonight and into tomorrow morning. Now, just south of St. Petersburg, let's go to the barrier island there, Anna Maria Island, as you get out of Tampa Bay. Also looking ominous on the horizon as they too brace for Tropical Storm Eta. And regardless of the strength, even if Eta is weakening, we still have so many threats that are going to be on the horizon, with the threat of storm surge, flooding rain, the winds, and then of course, Alex, we've also been tracking that threat for severe weather throughout the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a number of different risks that we'll be facing here and continue to face as we head through the rest of the afternoon and into our evening with what is now Tropical Storm Eta. 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm as of the last advisory that came out at 1 o'clock Eastern time. Moving to the north-northeast, right around 10 miles per hour with the central pressure at 990 millibars. You see where some of the worst of the weather is right now, especially on the east side. That's where we're finding some of those bands trying to set up here. And within those, that's where you find some gusty winds. That's where you find some heavy downpours and that risk for some isolated tornadoes. Now, we haven't had many warnings here in the last, maybe I'd say, hour or so, but that could certainly change as we head on through the rest of this afternoon into the evening. There's our one warning that's in place right now. It's a severe warning here for you, Collier, Monroe, parts of Miami-Dade in that warning. Storms moving on off towards the north. Warnings there until about 3 o'clock. The biggest risk is going to be damaging wind gusts with some of these storms. It could be in excess of 60 miles per hour, and you have to watch out because without a moment's notice, you could see one of these things quickly spin up a tornado. And so that is a risk here for us, something to watch out for. And if that warning does come out, certainly you want to make sure you're heating it, getting into the lowest floor of a sturdy building, and getting away from the windows. Again, if a tornado warning were to be issued right now, it's a damaging wind gust, but just be prepared for an isolated tornado to try to spin up there. All right, let's take a look at where this thing's headed. North and eastbound, that will continue, and the official forecast taking it on in basically by tonight, tomorrow morning. Somewhere in that general zone is where the center will be. Notice those wind speeds right around 65 miles per hour. Now, could it be a little weaker than that? That is certainly a possibility. But for now, I would certainly say be prepared for 65-mile-per-hour winds to move on in. And with that, that could certainly lead to some problems when it comes to power outages, so be prepared for that as well. Now, it'll quickly move across the northern stretches of Florida and quickly weaken as well. So this is, again, all looking better here for us across the northern part of the state. Again, still gusty, but certainly a lot less than what it could be, and then zipping north and east away from land as we head on through the end of Thursday and into Friday. And the computer models are in pretty good agreement with that taking shape. You don't see them all over the place right now. Pretty well clustered, so good confidence in what it's going to be doing over the next few hours and over tonight and into tomorrow. Take a look at the hurricane watches. They are still in place here across west central portions of Florida. Now, again, we have a tropical storm, but you still have at least the outside chance of getting a hurricane force wind gust. Can't completely rule that out, so that's why the hurricane watches are still in place. And we still, of course, have the tropical storm warnings as we do expect tropical storm conditions in those red zones while we're looking for the possibility for tropical storm conditions in the yellow area. St. Augustine to Daytona Beach dealing with that. But watch out for that risk for tornadoes anywhere you see that right now in the southwestern part of the state from Tampa south towards Naples. Until 5 o'clock, a tornado watch is in effect. So that's where we have conditions that are favorable for isolated tornadoes to try to spin up. We'll keep an eye on those areas. No tornado warnings for the time being, but Colleen, that no doubt could change. And of course, we look across the board and check in on the rest of the tropics where I tell you, we're still seeing some active areas.
I know. And Alex, I'm just the messenger, but if anyone's missed it, we had Theta, and now we may be able to see Iota. So again, we continue through the Greek alphabet. Let me give you a rundown here of what's going on in the Atlantic as well as in the Caribbean. Of course, there's Tropical Storm Eta that we continue to track. Then we have Invest 98L in the central Caribbean, and then we got Tropical Storm Theta well out into the Atlantic, making its way towards Europe and Western Africa. So first off, here's Tropical Storm Theta. It's going to be making a track through kind of the middle between the Azores and the Canary Islands as it tracks closer to Europe and Africa. 60-mile-an-hour winds moving to the east-northeast at 10 miles per hour. So that track does take it to the east, no threat to the United States as it continues in that direction. However, a little closer to home, we got to talk about Invest 98L. And so we already have flash flood watches out for Puerto Rico, the BVIs, as well as the U.S. Virgin Islands. Look at this cluster of thunderstorms. We have a tropical wave that's going to be moving into the rest of the Caribbean. As it does so, it is going to be in a favorable area for development development. And so over the next 5 days, the National Hurricane Center does give it an 80% chance of developing and then tracking west. A little eerie because it is very similar to that track of Eta as it began on Halloween in the Caribbean, and this could bring even more rain to Central America. We're continuing to track this historic 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. More on Eta right here on the Weather Channel.
Well, here's a look at things here for us in the Tampa area, and yeah, some gusty winds. You see the waters certainly looking much angrier than what would typically be the case here for us at this time of the year as we watch the water lapping up here and crashing against the wall there for you. But it's all thanks to Eta, Tropical Storm Eta, which is now getting closer and closer, bringing with it some of the winds, strong wind gusts, as well as some of those heavy downpours. And of course, we've got the alerts that are in place as well. And those warnings as well as watches extend from right around the Big Bend down towards the Naples area. Tropical storm warnings in the red and that yellow tropical storm watches. Colleen?
Florida just cannot get a break from Tropical Storm Eta. And more new video in now. Check out the waves along Florida's western coast. Now, this is in the Reddington Shores area. Eta causing those waves to swell. A couple of folks there looking at the waves and staying on the beach there, but parts of the coast are under a storm surge watch, so a lot of precautions if you are going to be venturing out ahead of the storm, or just don't do it. Stay at home as all this rain rolls in, the winds, and then of course there's also that threat of severe weather that we've been tracking throughout today. And this is also a look at Anna Maria Island, and this is just west of Bradenton. So as we get out of the Tampa Bay area, this is one of the barrier islands. It's had some gloomy skies throughout the day today. Those wind gusts over 30 miles an hour, and of course conditions will continue to deteriorate for the Tampa Bay area as we head through the rest of this afternoon and evening. So let's get you caught up on what you need to know as this storm closes in. Meteorologist Alex Wallace is in the lab with the latest. Alex.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Indeed, now we have our tropical storm, again, getting closer and closer to the shore. A 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm moving northeastbound at about 10 miles per hour. Now, at that advisory, which came out at 1 o'clock Eastern time, it was about 115 miles to the southwest of Tampa. As you see, there's the center of the circulation there. And what you've noticed here over the last, I'd say maybe hour or so, a little bit of a flare up here just on the east side. And it's going to be within that you're going to be talking about some stronger winds as well as some very heavy downpours moving in. So that's just offshore, getting ready to move on in south of Tampa. So keep an eye on that zone. And then even outside of that, you see some of these sort of banding features here showing up here that trail all the way back into the south portions of Florida down around the Keys. Within those, you get some downpours and gusty winds. And occasionally we've seen some even warnings coming out, whether that be severe thunderstorm warnings or even tornado warnings. Those risks certainly do exist. All right, so let's follow our way on into the next 24 hours or so and watch how this thing progresses north and eastbound. That's where it's going to be headed. By the time we get into early in the morning, somewhere in this zone is where the center will be. But remember where some of the worst of the weather is, on the east side of it. So if it's somewhere in this location, you're going to be talking about some of the worst weather over here. So you just keep that in mind. And also, as you look at those wind speeds, 65-mile-per-hour winds Thursday morning, maybe a little weaker than that. That's a possibility. But I would certainly say be prepared for the worst. And right now, it looks like that would be 65-mile-per-hour winds, enough to lead to issues when it comes to problems when it comes to power outages out there for us. So keep that in mind. And of course, there's going to be some heavy rain to contend with as it moves on through. But it will weaken quickly. That is anticipated as it moves across northern parts of the state of Florida and then emerges by Thursday night over the western portions of the Atlantic and then zips away, moving farther and farther away from the southeast coast. So we will see conditions really improving from west to east as we certainly work our way through the day on Thursday. Now, we do still have hurricane watches that are in place here across the west portions of Florida, and you may be wondering why they're hurricane watches when we've got a tropical storm. Well, that's because, again, it's very much on the cusp of being a hurricane. 75-mile-per-hour winds would designate it as a hurricane. Right now, it's 70. So it's not going to take a whole lot in terms of gusts to get to that point. So they don't want to let folks let their guard down, keeping those hurricane watches up because there is still that outside chance of potential for hurricane force winds to move on in. More likely will be, though, tropical storm force winds. And so that's why we are expecting that in that red zone. Ocala, you're in there. Lakeland back down towards Port Charlotte. And then in the yellow, that's where you have our tropical storm watches. Tropical storm conditions possible in those areas. All right, so there's a look at what we've got in terms of the winds Right now, Tampa, you're seeing winds sustained anywhere from 15 to 20 miles per hour. We're seeing gusts getting up over 30 and been that way for quite some time. Fort Myers right now, gusts around 33, and then you head down towards Naples. The wind gusts are now right around 31. That was approaching 40 about a half an hour ago, so that's come down just a little bit. And down around Key West, you're seeing those gusts right around 30 miles per hour with sustained winds at 20. So even far away from the center, which is right there, there's Key West. You're talking about 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So the possibility for still finding some strong winds even well away from the center definitely does exist. But the worst of the weather right now seems to be right in that zone, basically the eastern portion of the circulation on the west side. Yeah, you're barely finding much in the way of any wet weather in those zones. There's been just a lot of dry air working on through, and that's helping to kind of quench this thing just a bit. And so the outlook is for it to continue to weaken, and we can certainly hope for that. But again, preparing for the worst. Now, we will bring in Colleen here, and you're watching some of the other impacts that we'll find from the system. That comes in the form of still the possibility for some storm surge and flooding.
Yes, Alex, that's something we're watching very closely in that area that you just outlined, just across the Sun Coast and then up into the Tampa Bay area. This is a spot that is under that flash flood watch. Multiple inches of rain possible. Most of those areas have seen about 1 to 2 to maybe 3 inches of rain so far, and then we still have a long ways to go. And then even as we get down into the Fort Myers area, and then even still for South Florida, we do have flood watches that continue for areas that have seen so much rain from Eta's first landfall in Florida, and now they're still seeing shower and thunderstorm activity moving through today. And here's a look at the radar. A lot of rain on the way from Fort Myers up through Tampa. A closer look shows you just around 75 there. Some heavy pockets of rain rolling into Sarasota, St. Petersburg. And then again, as I mentioned, most of these areas have seen about 1 to 2 inches of rain so far in the last 12 hours. Now, some of these spots were a little dry for 2020, so this will certainly take you out of that deficit for many of these cities. But again, with too much rain in such a short amount of time, that's when we start to get some of that urban flooding and aggravate those problems, especially on some of those side streets. So please exercise caution. Of course, a lot of this coming in during a busy afternoon. We got the afternoon rush here in just a bit. So there's the radar, shows you Eta crossing the peninsula there. By about Thursday morning, we'll start to see it rolling just maybe north of Tampa, making landfall, and then continuing across central Florida and even North Florida, Jacksonville, Amelia Island. I mean, these are areas that are going to see the effects of the wind and the rain, even Orlando seeing the effects of Eta as we continue through your Thursday. And then by Thursday evening, conditions start to improve for the Sunshine State. So rain still to come. Of course, the most of it is going to be just around the Tampa Bay area, but then the rest of the state could see upwards of 1 to 2 inches of rain. So a lot going on with the rain. Also, we're going to be watching for the potential of any storm surge across this west coast of Florida. But one thing also, Alex, that we have been tracking today is the severe weather threats, some severe thunderstorm warnings, and even earlier a tornado threat too.
Absolutely, Colleen. That is one of those risks that we find ourselves dealing with these systems, these tropical systems getting closer and closer to land. That is a risk that we have to watch out for in places like Tampa, as well as Naples. A tornado condition index, Torcon, of 3 in place. And so there is certainly a chance for tornadoes, not on the high end of the scale, but it's not a 0. So certainly keep that in mind. That is something that we'll be following. Let's take a look at what we got in terms of the radar. And we certainly have some of those downpours that are in place. There is the center of the circulation. And notice here just now on off towards the east, we are finding ourselves dealing with a little bit of a flare up here in terms of the intensity of the rain. And it's going to be within that as it approaches here the west coast. Some very strong gusty winds and some very heavy downpours with that as it moves its way on in. So we'll keep an eye on that area. But even outside of that, you can see how this sort of area has lined up on one of those outer bands here for you that extends all the way down towards the Keys. And within that, we now have a severe thunderstorm warning here for you. We've got a series of storms that continue to move northbound here for you at a pretty decent clip, 30, close to 40 miles per hour, the movement northbound. But it's Collier, parts of Monroe, and Miami-Dade counties until 4 o'clock. You are dealing with a severe thunderstorm warning. Watch out for the possibility of some strong wind gusts that could be in excess of 60 miles per hour, but also the chance for an isolated tornado to quickly spin up at a moment's notice with any of these storms as they move on through. That's what can happen with these systems. Spin-ups happening quickly, and before you know it, it's right on top of you. So just be prepared for that. Even though it's a severe thunderstorm warning and the main threat for now is a gusty wind, there could be an isolated tornado that spins up pretty quickly within that area. In fact, as we zoom out a bit, this is an area here that is under a tornado watch. So conditions are favorable for tornadoes to spin up here, and that watch is here for us until about 5 o'clock. So dealing with that for about another 2 hours or so. We'll keep an eye from Tampa all the way down towards Alligator Alley for that risk for tornadoes to try to get going. Colleen, you've got a bit more on how things may time out with this system.
Yeah, let's time it out for folks that are watching Eta approach the Florida coast for the second time. So what are we dealing with? The question is, when can you see some of the effects of Eta, the storm surge, the flooding, the winds, the severe weather for places like Tampa, Naples, Orlando, Jacksonville? We're going from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast. And of course, some of the challenges may be different and the timing a little different for some of you. So let's start it city by city. First off, taking a look at the track, we're going to be watching it make landfall maybe sometime earlier tomorrow morning. And this is going to be just to the north of Tampa around Spring Hill and Cedar Key. And then as we continue through Thursday afternoon and evening, this is going to be spreading there from Gainesville all the way to Jacksonville. So the high-res radar, as I map this out for Tampa, you have some very heavy rain that's going to be rolling through for the rest of today into tonight. Again, the winds are going to be gusty, over 50 miles an hour at times. At least this is a quick hitter, though, because by tomorrow mid-morning, by the afternoon, you start to dry out. It may still stay breezy in your area, but again, the rain is going to be out of there, moving through the rest of the peninsula of Florida. Now, here's a look at the winds. A lot of them offshore right now, so that's why we're not seeing too much of a storm surge, except for maybe on the western sides of the Tampa Bay area. But look at these winds, up to 50 miles an hour as we head through the rest of this afternoon and evening. And then they become onshore as we head through the overnight hours through tomorrow morning. That is going to be posing that risk for that storm surge around 2 to 4 feet for areas. And then even after the rain ends, you still have the winds up to around 25 to 30 miles an hour through Tampa, and then things start to lighten up by the end of the day. So again, you'll see those tropical storm force winds late tonight into Thursday morning, also through Thursday evening. Rain to come about 2 to 3 inches on top of what you've already seen. And then Sarasota, a little farther to the south, a very similar story with 2 to 3 inches of rain on the way. And then as we go even more south around Fort Myers, also into Naples, you'll have more scattered rain throughout the rest of today. Winds still picking up around 30 to 40 miles an hour, and this is going to continue overnight into tomorrow morning. So not constant rain, maybe not as heavy as your neighbors in the Tampa Bay spot, but you're still going to have a lot of rain on the way for an area that has already seen so much over the last several days. But at least things do start to clear up a bit as we head through the end of Thursday. Alex?
Thanks, Colleen. Well, I'll tell you, if there's one thing that South Florida does not need, that would be more rain. Yeah, after weeks of it, another 8 inches of rain from Eta had just nowhere to drain, flooding neighborhood streets and even some homes and businesses. So far this year, Fort Lauderdale has just over 78.5 inches of rainfall. That's more than 6.5 feet, and that's more than 21 inches above average for this time of the year. Now, the flooding affecting other parts of Broward and Miami-Dade counties. Some areas got 18 inches of rain in just 48 hours. Standing water creating very dangerous conditions. There have actually been numerous reports of stranded drivers, and rescue crews in Lauderhill say one driver was left in critical condition. This after their vehicle sank after driving into a canal Sunday night. And that rain not going anywhere anytime soon. Here's a look at things here for us. Key West, where the additional rainfall is set to move on through, at least the chance for that. Wind advisories in place as well. Got steady winds there for you, 25 miles per hour with gusts that could be around 35 miles per hour. And look at the water lapping up there for us. They're right around that southernmost point. All right, so here's a look at Miami. That's another spot that has felt its fair share of rain from Eta, picking up almost 6 inches of rainfall, 5.99 to be exact. The rainfall this year in Miami is reaching up over 82 inches, 82.21, with it being now the 7th wettest year on record. Current record here for us is 89.33, and again, we still have a little bit more, almost just a little less than 2 months to go. We'll see if we get to close to that, but right now, knocking on the door, there's a line of storms that is in place just to the west of Miami. We'll have to keep an eye on that, see if it maybe rotates into the Miami metro. So the risk is there for us, and that's why there are flood watches in place here in southeastern portions of Florida, from around West Palm Beach and down south of Miami towards Homestead. You head north and westbound, more flood watches in place here for us along the west coast. We'll have to keep an eye on those areas, even though those areas here, when we look at the soil moisture, dry, it only takes a bit of rain coming down in a short period of time to lead to some problems. So even in those dry areas, we'll have to keep an eye on things. And then certainly here in the southeast part of the state, where we have been very, very wet, we'll have to watch those areas too. Colleen, you've got a bit more on these downpours that we are experiencing.
Yes, and the downpours are not just going to be for Florida, but we're also going to be seeing these up across the not New England area, but the mid-Atlantic, also the southeast. So we have the tropical storm, we have a high pressure system, we have a cold front moving toward the east coast. All that combined is bringing in a lot more rain for many more states. And so a lot of tropical moisture means we do have those tropical downpours with flood watches and flash flood watches in place for the Carolinas, as well as up into Virginia, and then even including our nation's capital. So through tomorrow morning, we are going to be concerned with some flash flooding all the way from Charlotte up through Richmond, D.C. Again, this also will stretch into even the northern parts of Georgia. And then, of course, as you get into the Appalachians, you can squeeze out a little more of that moisture. And so we may see some more problems enhanced by the terrain in the area. There's that front. It's been a strong one. I mean, we've been talking about snow behind it as this low pressure system rolled across the northern plains and into the Midwest. And then ahead of it, we've had record high temperatures. And then also ahead of it, a lot of tropical moisture. And so you get that lift, the tropical moisture involved, and then that just spells a lot of rain. So we have a radar just lighting up with the green, showers and thunderstorms across the area. Nothing severe at the moment, but some of these have been posing a flood risk for areas across the Carolinas. So again, just outside of Charlotte, we had some earlier flash flood warnings for the area. So again, just outside of those areas in North Carolina, we'll continue to see a lot more rain on the way. And then this continues for South Carolina, and then even just a messy day for parts of Georgia and the rest of the southeast. We'll be back with more on Eta right after this.
It's a new video of what is an all too familiar scene in Florida this week. This shows you the flooding that is already occurring in Sarasota, Florida. Now, Eta sending rain and kicking up some of the waves along the western Gulf Coast of the state. Some roads filled with water already. And that's the type of stuff you do not want to be trying to drive through. It can be very, very dangerous. We've already heard reports of folks being stranded in some of the waters from Eta from earlier in the week when Eta was impacting parts of South Florida down towards the Keys. All right, let's work our way back into how things are faring for us right now. And in and around the Tampa area, again, tropical storm conditions. That's something that we'll be following and dealing with here as we work our way on through the day and into tomorrow morning as well. Right now, we're seeing winds gusting close to around 20 miles per hour in Tampa. Sustained winds we've seen at 10 to 15 at times. See the water coming on in as well. Some of those waves crashing on in. So a little angrier there in the waters than is typically the case is what we're finding right now. And we'll see more of that as we work our way on through the day. Here's another look in on St. Petersburg. Gusts up to now over 30 miles per hour. Again, more angry waters here as the water continues to crash on in. And yeah, again, that's basically the situation. And what we'll deal with here is work our way through the rest of this afternoon as well as our evening. As we deal with this and now what is now tropical storm Eta, 70 mile per hour tropical storm moving to the northeast at about 10 miles per hour. And we're starting to see here kind of on that eastern edge here, a little bit of a flare up. Some heavier rains. There'll be some gusty winds associated with that. Getting ready to move right on in ashore. We'll have to keep an eye on that because, again, some heavy rain may be associated with that within that zone as it moves north and eastbound. Maybe in the order of 3 to 5 inches of rain can't be ruled out, along with some of those stronger wind gusts as well. Now, there are still hurricane watches that are in place. And you may be asking, why are there hurricane watches when we have a tropical storm? Well, that's because there's still a chance we could see hurricane conditions impact these areas. So outside chance, but a chance. Right now, the greater risk will be the tropical storm force winds that could impact us here for us. So that's why there are tropical storm warnings in that red, and then you've got in that yellow tropical storm watches, where tropical storm conditions are at least a possibility, even over towards the East Coast, Daytona Beach included. So we'll follow the path, moving again off towards the north and east, and it'll be somewhere in this zone as we get in towards your Thursday morning as a possible 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Now, it could be weaker. That is certainly a possibility as well, but I'd say prepare for it to be in this range, a 65-mile-per-hour storm. And then as it zips its way across North Florida, and I do say zip because it's going to move pretty quickly, which is a good thing. It will also weaken very quickly and then move its way offshore and pull away from the southeast coast. So again, conditions will be improving across Florida as we head on through the day on Thursday. But for now, you can see where those winds are. We talked about Tampa gusting up now over 30. Fort Myers, 33-mile-per-hour wind gusts being measured there. Naples, 31-mile-per-hour winds. And Key West, you've seen your winds steadily increase here. It looks like that sort of band of rain that's set up. One of those bands have moved right over Key West. And when you get underneath one of those bands, you get some very strong winds right now, gusting up to 30, and you also talk about some of the heavy downpours as well. So that's a risk right now. And we see in the western part of the state a severe thunderstorm warning here. We've been watching these storms come ashore and move northbound here, and it's within those areas that you have the potential here, at least right now, for gusty winds in excess of 60 miles per hour. And we have to watch out for that risk for those tornadoes to try to spin up very quickly. That is a risk as well. We'll keep an eye on that area right now. It's a severe gust risk, but tornado watch is in place, and that's around here in the western portion of the state from Tampa south to Naples. Anywhere in that area until 5 o'clock right now, there is a tornado watch, so conditions are favorable for tornadoes to spin up. You see our Torcon values. They are in the 2 and 3 range, essentially across central and south Florida for today. So it's not on the high end of the scale, but it's also not a 0. We'll have to watch out for that risk, along with a flood risk as well across southeastern and western portions of the state. Colleen?
And earlier, Alex, we spoke to Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis, who provided an overview of the situation from his perspective and the latest on preparations to respond after Eta makes landfall.
And there are wind gusts that are very strong, could even reach hurricane force. We also anticipate, we're already seeing in southwest Florida, some of the storm surge and the rising water levels. So people need to be on the lookout for flash flooding. Don't be venturing out into big areas of water. You could have power lines down. You're also looking at a landfall now potentially north of Tampa Bay area and the Hernando County region. Even a tropical storm will likely lead to vegetation and some other things with trees. So that's going to be an issue as well. We have not had major power outages yet, but we obviously think that that is going to happen. It may not be massive outages in any one spot, but it's going to be over a large portion of that west coast where there'll probably be some. So we're working hard to have supplies in there as soon as it's safe. And then we're also working with the utilities to make sure that they're in to be able to get the restoration. If you look at, I mean, you guys have been following this track. It's really been a crazy storm to watch. Yesterday morning when I got briefed, it was looking at a northern Gulf Coast impact in the Pensacola, Alabama, Mississippi region. And then obviously that's gotten revised now. We're looking at north of Tampa Bay. So folks are prepared. There are not any massive evacuations been ordered, but in some of the local communities, some low-lying areas in Manatee County and Hernando County, you are seeing voluntary evacuations. Not a lot of shelters have needed to be open yet, but if those are, we're obviously there to be able to help with any types of supplies that they need.
Well, here we are checking in on some new video here showing you what's going on around the Fort Myers Beach area in Florida. And yeah, some heavy downpours, those windshield wipers working overtime. And yeah, it looks like the road covered in a bit of water. You see that bus there on the right side kind of trudging through some of that water. So yeah, ponding on these roads, and that may be a possibility as we work our way through the rest of today and a few other areas here on the West Coast in particular. So certainly be careful with that. If you can really avoid being out, that would be the thing to do. Who wants to be driving through that kind of a mess? So here's the latest when it comes to Tropical Storm Eta. It's a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Central pressure sitting at 990 millibars. That's come up a bit from where it was at the last advisory. It was around 983. So when you start to see pressures rising, that's an indication that you're talking about a system that's on the downward trend in terms of its strength. So again, it's come down from what it was, a 75-mile-per-hour hurricane, to a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Now, the difference in terms of the impacts between those two, not a whole lot. Really expecting the same impacts, whether it was coming in as a 75-mile-per-hour hurricane or a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Moving north-northeast at 10 miles per hour, there it is. Center of the circulation there. We've noticed here over the last, let's say, hour or so, hour and a half or so, bit of a flare-up in terms of the rain intensity here right on the west coast, getting it to move on in there. And within that zone, we're going to have to watch out for at least the possibility for some really heavy rain that could add up. Maybe 3 to 5 inches of rain as it zooms on by here in the Tampa, St. Pete area. Here's what it looks like here on the water vapor imagery. And boy, I tell you, look at what's on the west side of this thing. That is all of the dry air that's hanging out there in the Gulf of Mexico. And we've seen at times some of that trying to kind of work its way on in to the system. And that's how it kind of kept it at bay a bit. And certainly on the west side of this thing, as we've watched the rainfall amounts and the rainfall intensity really drop off on the western portion of the circulation. The eastern area is still finding some of that rain coming down pretty steadily. But eventually, the dry air is expected to win out, and we should see this thing really start to weaken, certainly as it works its way onshore and then moves its way across North Florida. In fact, that's in the projected path with the National Hurricane Center's forecast, moving north and eastbound, and by basically early tomorrow morning, somewhere in this zone, maybe around Cedar Key, the Spring Hill area, somewhere in there, as a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Now, it may be a little weaker than that. That is a possibility. We can hope for that to be the case, but I would prepare for a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm and then zooming its way across North Florida, really watching the intensity come down and then moving its way offshore and away from the southeast coast. Now, we do still have hurricane watches, and that's because there's still a chance that we could see hurricane conditions. Still a possibility, although I'd say not likely, a possibility. More likely would be tropical storm conditions. So that's why there are tropical storm warnings. Anywhere you see that red, and then you have the yellow areas, tropical storm watches, that extend all the way to the east coast because we could see tropical storm conditions there. Right now, the winds right around the 15 to 20 mile an hour range in terms of the sustained winds, but there are gusts in all these cases here that are up around 30 miles per hour. So strong winds, gusty winds, and that's expected to continue, Colleen, as we head through the rest of today.
Yes, and Alex, Florida isn't the only state that's getting downpours of tropical moisture. We have a high pressure system out in the Atlantic and then a cold front that's sweeping closer and closer to the East Coast. And so heavy rain is falling across the Southeast with flood alerts already active in the Carolinas and Virginia. So yes, misery likes company, and with all this tropical moisture in place, we have much of the mid-Atlantic and the Southeast also tapping in to all of this heavy rain. And so right now we do have flood alerts, flood watches out across areas of Asheville, Boone, Charlotte, even getting close to Greensboro, North Carolina, and then flash flood watches out that continue across the Outer Banks as well as into Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, and then even up to our nation's capital around D.C. under this flash flood watch. So through tomorrow morning, these same areas could be dealing with some flood problems as we have abundant moisture, and that front is providing the lift we need to get these storms going. And some of these storms may need to be put in timeout today. We do have severe thunderstorms possible just around Hickory, Greensboro, up through Raleigh, also getting into the Richmond area and Roanoke. Again, it's not going to be widespread, but some of these could be a bit unruly, and especially you can always see those lightning strikes out there, so you may have to be taking some of your activities indoors. So here's what I'm talking about in picture form. There's that front that we've been talking about, the winter weather behind it. We've been talking about record highs ahead of it, and also ahead of it, a lot of moisture streaming up between that high pressure system and our tropical storm Eta. And so again, this is why we're just seeing numerous showers and thunderstorms just blanketing the East Coast, all the way up from portions of Georgia through the Carolinas, then getting up into the Chesapeake Bay. So this is something that's going to be going on today all the way through tomorrow. So there's what it looks like. Rinse and repeat as we head through your Wednesday with more showers and thunderstorms on the way, really getting squeezed up across the mid-Atlantic as we head through your Thursday as that front continues to roll closer and closer, and then finally seeing some clearing as we get a little closer to the weekend. We'll have more on all of this wet weather, also continuing to track Eta right here on the Weather Channel.
Well, some new video into us showing you what Eta is doing along Florida's western Gulf Coast. Now, see the trees swaying here in the winds, also the waves really kicking up. This here from a band from Eta that pushed over St. Petersburg, the area there. And you can see that's generally what we'll find. Within those bands, you start to talk about the heavy wind, heavy rain, as well as the stronger winds and then you get things time to relax, like what we're seeing here in Naples. No bands of rain on top of us. But we are finally finding certainly the water's looking a little choppy. Occasionally you'll see maybe a surfer in the water, and got to be careful getting out there because it can be dangerous here for us. In fact, all up and down the West Coast, really want to avoid getting out into those waters. But a lot of folks there on this pier, they're certainly curious looking at what Eta is churning up there in the waters. Let's take a look at what we've got in terms of Eta. Again, it is now a tropical storm, which is a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm. We still have a hurricane watch that's in place. And you may be thinking, okay, we've got a tropical storm. Why do we have hurricane watches? Well, because there's still a chance at the potential for hurricane conditions here in this zone here where you see that orange showing up. Now, it's an outside chance, but a chance nonetheless, so we don't want to let our guard down. What is more likely is that we'll find those tropical storm conditions. So that's why tropical storm warnings are in place. Those areas here in that red, that's where tropical storm conditions are expected. And then in the yellow, that's where you have tropical storm conditions that are at least a possibility, tropical storm watches. So Daytona Beach, you are in the middle of that as well. So even over towards the East Coast, we could see tropical storm conditions realized. All right, let's take a look at what we've got in terms of where this thing will be headed, north and eastbound over the next 24 hours or so. And by the time we get to tomorrow morning, somewhere in this zone is where the system will be. And right now, the forecast is for it to be a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Now, could it be weaker than that? That's a possibility too here, but we want to be prepared for the worst. So right now, the worst looks like it'll be 65-mile-per-hour winds moving on in. And then once it moves ashore and moves across North Florida, really going to rapidly weaken at that point and rapidly move as well, as opposed to sitting, dumping all kinds of rain over a period of time. This thing will zip on by, and we will really watch conditions improve throughout the day tomorrow here across Florida, then zipping its way off towards the east as we head on through Thursday night and into Friday. So there again are the latest stats when it comes to Eta, 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Central pressure sitting at 990 millibars at this point, and a movement off towards the north-northeast at 10 miles per hour. We've noticed here as we've worked our way on through the last maybe I'd say hour and a half, some stronger wind and rain really developing here kind of on the eastern edge of where that center of the circulation is. And so we'll watch that area move its way on into right around the Sarasota area and then eventually up towards Tampa. And it's within that area where we could see some heavy rain impacting us. Anywhere in the order of maybe 3 to 5 inches of rain before it's all said and done. And again, some stronger winds will be coming with that as well. So that'll be moving on through here over the next couple of hours. We'll certainly have to pay attention to that. Right now, looking at those winds, basically 15 to 20 mile per hour sustained winds from Tampa all the way down towards Key West. But gusts in all those areas are right around 30 miles per hour. Colleen?
Wow, still a lot going on for the Sunshine State, and parts of South Florida are still trying to recover from what Eta did earlier this week with its first landfall. Heavy rain swamping places that just did not need it, and one of them was Fort Lauderdale. Before Eta arrived, you already had a 21-inch rainfall surplus for the year. Now that surplus is close to 29 inches of rain, and so of course it has flooded neighborhoods, and folks are struggling in these areas as they're waiting for much of these waters to recede and to return back to normal life. Jen Carfagno shows us how people are coping in one hard-hit community.
Getting to work can mean getting wet.
I have 18 inches of water all the way around my house. I can't even move my truck.
The Melrose Park neighborhood, a working-class area of Fort Lauderdale, underwater. 80-year-old Evelyn Henry has lived in Melrose Park 3 decades. Eta pushing knee-deep floodwaters inside her house.
3 weeks ago, it was flooded, the water up to the door, but it didn't come inside the house like it is today.
The city deploying an army of vacuum trucks to suck up floodwaters and haul them away. But they did little to clear streets. Uber Eats driver Harmony Peterson can't deliver food. Her small sedan can't handle the high water.
It was good yesterday like it's good now, but then it started pouring again overnight, and you know, you just can't call it.
Standing water, damaging vehicles. Marky White making repairs.
Water get in between electrical stuff, car won't start, jam engine, you know. So I'm here as a rescue team right now.
And some of what unfortunately just aggravated flood problems even more is how much rain the east coast of Florida has already seen so far for 2020. That puts them still in a flood watch right now, and then this also extends into the west coast around Naples, Fort Myers, and then all the way up through Tampa Bay, where Eta is expected to make that second landfall in Florida. So as I mentioned, for 2020, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, for example, those areas, they have been no stranger to rain, and so they have a huge surplus even before this storm came through. Now, across the west coast, though, a little drier, so that may aid in some of the flooding, at least some of the ground soaking up the rains that are coming in. But either way, we could still see some problems, especially in the urban areas. So again, future radar still shows a lot of rain rolling in for South Florida, all the way up through Fort Myers, and getting into northern Florida as well. We're tracking the latest on Eta all day long right here on the Weather Channel.
This program is brought to you in part by Humira.
Welcome back as we continue to track what's happening with Eta. And here's a live look in Tampa, where we are finding ourselves seeing the waters a little bit angry, certainly more angry than they typically would be with nothing lurking offshore. We've seen some downpours coming on through, along with those gusty winds. Right now, 10-mile-an-hour winds sustained, but gusts are getting up around 20 to 30 at times. We've seen that there in the Tampa area. And so that's going to be the general theme here for us, with some downpours and wind as we head on through the next 24 hours or so before things really start to improve there. Then we take a look at Naples, where our folks are gathering here on this pier. Certainly curious as to what is going on as Eta lurks, again, just offshore. Not too many folks, although I've noticed maybe a few more surfers getting out of the waters. I'll probably want to avoid that at this point, as again, there's a danger in those waters. So be careful if you can avoid that. I would certainly recommend that. So that's what we've got in terms of what the live pictures look like. Here's what it looks like with the satellite, as well as the radar in place. The latest advisory now from the National Hurricane Center is the 4 o'clock advisory, and really not a whole lot has changed outside of the speed and direction. It's moving more north now and moving at 12 miles per hour. It was 10 miles per hour at the last advisory, so just a little faster. But in terms of the wind speeds, that's the same, as well as the central pressure. That is the same as the previous advisory, which came out at 1 o'clock. So not a whole lot has changed here with this thing. But again, get a little closer to land. That would be the other change here for us. And we've seen some of the wind and as well as the rain intensity increasing just a bit here, getting up around the Sarasota area and getting closer and closer to places like St. Petersburg and Tampa. So those are the areas that we'll be watching closest here when it comes to the heaviest rains over the next couple of hours. Maybe in the order as this area of rain, this batch of rain moves on in, that could bring us, again, 3 to maybe 5 inches of rain before it's all said and done. But here's a look at the water vapor imagery. And boy, when you look back out here into the Gulf, look at all this dry air. And it's that dry air which is eventually really going to take over and really overcome this thing as we head on through the next several hours. That will lend for it to weaken a bit more, of course, interaction with land as well. So all things that are working against this thing really ramping up. That is not anticipated. We should continue to see a steady decline with those winds. Now, taking a look at the projected path as we move our way through time, moving its way again off towards the north and northeast across North Florida. By the time we get to Thursday, late, looks like during the afternoon, evening, somewhere in this zone in the northeastern part of the state, maybe around Jacksonville, as a 40-mile-per-hour tropical system, then quickly weakening here as it moves its way across North Florida. At least that's what is anticipated. Right now, we still have tropical storm warnings that are in place. That's basically impacting basically from Cedar Key back down towards the Port Charlotte area, maybe a little point south of that. Then even inland areas from Lakeland back up towards Ocala. And as you head towards the eastern part of the state, we do have tropical storm watches. So tropical storm conditions are possible there as we head on in through the day tomorrow. Now, into South Florida, still feel the impacts, again, well away from the center, but some of these bands of rain have moved on through, and that's led to a severe thunderstorm warning here until 4 o'clock. So for about another almost 10 minutes, I say just under 10 minutes, severe thunderstorm warning there, Collier, Monroe, as well as Miami-Dade County, at least part of that county, until 4 o'clock, severe thunderstorm warning. 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts, the main threat, but the threat is also there for isolated tornadoes to spin up, and that can happen very, very quickly with any of these storms. So just keep that in mind. Right now, the main risk is damaging wind gusts, but we do have the risk for tornadoes to try to quickly spin up out there for you. So number of different risks, even outside of where the center of the circulation is, those bands of rain set up, Colleen, and you know what can happen within those.
Yes, of course. And also, Alex, we have to talk about the other stuff, that it's not just Eta in the tropics. I wish that we were only dealing with one, but we have a few more in the wings and maybe even the potential of Iota. So let's get straight to it. First off, there's Tropical Storm Eta. Then we have Invest 98L in the Caribbean. And then well off into the Atlantic, we do have Tropical Storm Theta. So yes, we are on to the name Theta as we continue to work our way through the Greek alphabet. Here's a look at Tropical Storm Theta, 60-mile-an-hour winds. It's going to be taking a track between the Azores and the Canary Islands. And so it is going off to the east towards Europe and Africa. No threat to the U.S. However, a little closer to home, we do have flash flood watches out for Puerto Rico, also the BVIs and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And this is prompted by a cluster of thunderstorms that's starting to develop in parts of the Caribbean as a tropical wave is moving in. And so as that wave continues to track over the next 5 days, it is going to be getting into some more favorable conditions, and we could potentially be looking at another tropical depression. So again, the National Hurricane Center has given this area an 80% chance of developing in the next 5 days. And eerily enough, it's very similar to where Eta started in the Caribbean, then moving off to the west. If anything, it's just going to bring a lot more rain to Central America, a place that does not need any more rain. So if this were to develop, we are on to Iota. So that would be the name as we are continuing to track Eta and Theta. We continue also to keep you up to date on this historic 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. We'll have more on Tropical Storm Eta as it sets eyes on Florida later on tonight.
Well, former hurricane, now Tropical Storm Eta, taking its aim at Florida's Gulf Coast this afternoon. The storm already made landfall in Florida once. That was late Sunday night in the Florida Keys. Now hooking back around for a second round. Here's a live look, Tampa, which is under a tropical storm warning as Eta closes in on the Sunshine State. What we've got is those gusty winds. We'll be talking some heavy downpours here for us as it continues to get closer and closer and eventually moves its way ashore. We've got the alerts that are in place. You can see them, the warnings that extend from around the Big Bend all the way down towards just south of Port Charlotte here for you, tropical storm warnings, and even off to the East Coast, tropical storm watches in place. St. Augustine down towards Daytona Beach are included in that. Colleen?
And Alex, we continue to get more new video in checking out the waves along Florida's western coast as they brace for Eta. Now, this is in the Reddington Shores area. Of course, this tropical storm causing those waves to swell, and even parts of the coast are under a storm surge watch. And now also taking a look at Anna Maria Island just west of Bradenton. So this barrier island as you get out of Tampa Bay there. Also bracing for Eta, you can see the skies have been gray, a little ominous throughout the afternoon with those winds gusting over 30 miles an hour. But a lot is going to change as those conditions continue to deteriorate as we head through your Wednesday evening and into Thursday. So let's get you caught up on what you need to know as this storm closes in. Meteorologist Alex Wallace is in the lab with the latest. Alex.
Hi, thanks, Colleen. And really the latest here, we've got the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center, the 4 o'clock advisory. And really not a whole lot has changed. Now, the hurricane hunters, they've been able to go on through and kind of sample what's been going on with Eta and really have found that not much has changed. So we are looking at a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm, basically the same as what it was at the 1 o'clock advisory. The central pressure also the same, sitting at 990. The one difference here is it is moving now northbound as opposed to northeast. That was what it was, moving at 10 miles per hour. Now it's moving northbound at 12 miles per hour. So it's picked up a little bit of speed, and it's more of a northward trajectory with the system at this point. But it's also getting a little closer as well to land. So when we look at the presentation here on the radar, you can see where most of the worst weather is, basically on the east side. On the west side, not a whole lot. There hasn't been a whole lot of activity there for us when it comes to in the form of rainfall. Really, a lot of dry air was really worked into the system, and that should continue to keep it at bay, if not even weaken it a bit more as it continues through tonight and into tomorrow. So that is certainly a positive when it comes to when it comes to Eta. There is that dry air. When we look at the water vapor imagery, the brownish shades. Yeah, that is all the dry air that's been there hanging out in the Gulf of Mexico, and some of that has been working its way on into the system. So again, it just hasn't been able to really get those thunderstorms going and maintaining themselves for too long because that dry air just kind of caps that off. So that has been really our saving grace when it comes to Eta and not allowing it to really flare up and really thrive in this area. So that should continue here for us as it moves off towards the north and northeast here as we head on into basically tonight and tomorrow, making that landfall somewhere in this zone as we head into tonight and early tomorrow, and then zipping across the northern stretches of Florida. Now, by the time we get to Thursday afternoon, evening, maybe right around Jacksonville, if not maybe moving even offshore with 40-mile-per-hour winds, maybe even a little bit weaker than that. We'll see, but again, it should continue as it moves its way over across North Florida, really rapidly weakening it at that point and then zipping offshore and moving away. There are some of those alerts. Again, we've got the tropical storm warnings anywhere in that red, and it's within that zone that we do have at least the expectation for tropical storm conditions. Once you start to get into the yellow areas, those are the tropical storm watches. That's where we have at least the possibility and the potential for tropical storm conditions. So can't rule that out in places like Daytona Beach as well as St. Augustine. So we'll keep an eye on those areas, and even back up over towards the Big Bend. Again, can't rule out some tropical storm conditions there. But again, the likelihood of tropical storm winds in that red zone. Right now, we're looking at winds basically anywhere from 15 to 20 miles per hour. That's sustained winds. Tampa, you're dealing with that, down towards Fort Myers, Naples, and Key West with those gusts. The gusts are getting up around 30. We've seen that now for the last couple of hours, all up and down the West Coast, down towards the Keys as well. So some strong winds. We've been watching this band that's kind of set up in that zone, and within that band, we've been watching some severe thunderstorm warnings pop up. There is the risk for gusty, damaging winds in excess of 60 miles per hour, and isolated tornadoes can quickly spin up. That is a risk, and we've seen some warnings here and there, and that's something you have to be prepared for because it can happen at a moment's notice, these isolated tornadoes spinning up. Now, they, again, happen pretty quickly. They tend to be brief, and they tend to be on the lower end of the scale when it comes to the intensity of these tornadoes. But a tornado is a tornado, and it can cause damage. So if you get underneath a tornado warning, if one is issued, know where you're going to go now. Lowest floor of a sturdy structure, basement if you have it, but a lower floor of a sturdy structure and away from windows is where you want to be. The key and the goal is to essentially put as much between you and the outside of the storm as possible. So we'll keep an eye on that. We don't have any tornado warnings at this point, but that could certainly change. And again, the system's getting closer and closer. We'll continue to watch for those strong and gusty winds, particularly here in the west central portions of Florida. Then, of course, we've got the issues when it comes to storm surge and the flood threat too, Colleen.
Yes, Alex, we're detailing out the storm surge and, of course, all the rain that's going to be falling across much of the state of Florida. So, of course, we do have flash flood watches out that now extend across parts of the west coast of Florida, up across the Sun Coast, and then flood watches still in effect for South Florida after all that rain fell, especially around Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, as well as the Miami area. And the rain really starting to pick up as we head from Tampa down through Fort Myers. We're going to have those bands of showers and thunderstorms continuing to roll through, and then even a lot of rain across South Florida too as we have more scattered activity, but again, round after round of showers and thunderstorms. And a lot of tropical moisture in the air means that these are going to be great rainfall producers. So we could definitely see several inches of rain for some spots. And already look at these rainfall totals just over the last 12 hours, anywhere from 1 to almost 4 inches of rain from St. Pete down through Venice, as well as Fort Myers, Naples, seeing a little under an inch, but more to come, especially as we get closer to the Tampa Bay area, where much of that rain is just starting to roll onto shore and continuing to uptick in intensity. Now, as we go through the future radar, there is Eta as it continues to work its way into Florida overnight into Thursday morning, then working its way across the peninsula. So Orlando, the east coast of Florida, Jacksonville, Amelia Island, you're not exempt from this. You're certainly going to see some rough weather for a short period of time tomorrow before things clear out by Thursday evening. So rain still to come, 3 to 5 inches there around Tampa. The rest of the state could see upwards of 2 to 3 inches of rain on top of everything that has already occurred. And then, of course, the storm surge watch in effect just north of Cedar Key and then all the way down south of Cedar Key through Fort Myers. We do have a storm surge warning. So it's really going to depend on those winds. And so we could see some storm surges anywhere from around 3 to 5 feet there around Sarasota up into the Tampa Bay area, maybe about 2 to 4 feet. So again, as the center of Eta starts to move closer to the Florida coastline, you'll see those winds turning out of the direction for an onshore flow, and that helps to push that water up against the coastline. And so that's why we are calling for some water starting to rise in these areas. And then you always have to take into account the tidal cycles that can also add to this. But, you know, we're talking about the flooding rains. We're talking about the storm surge. But also, Alex, even at the top of our show earlier, we had many warnings out there. So there's a severe weather threat, too, as Eta starts to move closer to Florida.
Absolutely, indeed. That is oftentimes a risk when these tropical systems work their way ashore. So definitely we have to watch out for that. Places like Tampa, Naples as well. We've got Torcon values that are right around the 3 range, 2s and 3s here for us. So it's a shot at dealing with tornadoes. Not a guarantee. It's not a high risk, but it is a risk. So we certainly want to take it seriously. Let's take a look at what's going on. There is the center of the circulation there spinning here again just off the west coast. Notice where we've got a lot of the rain, and at least some of the heaviest rains now beginning to develop and push just onshore. Some pretty heavy rains getting in towards places like Sarasota, St. Petersburg, close to Tampa. And then outside of that, we've got this band that's kind of set up here. And within that, we've been watching some thunderstorms develop and move on through. And we've seen some warnings here and there. We've seen some severe warnings. We've seen some tornado warnings as well. And that could happen at a moment's notice. See a bit of a flare up of some of the lightning strikes showing up there for you around the Keys. So a little bit more intensity. Now, we do have a tornado watch here for us that's in effect for you in the western portions of the state of Florida. Basically until 5 o'clock. So for just a bit under an hour, that watch is in effect. So within that zone, conditions are favorable for tornadoes to spin up. And that includes Tampa sliding all the way back down towards Alligator Alley, again, until 5 o'clock. Torcon values, again, we've got that in place here for us. You've got the severe risk that's in play basically across central and south Florida with the Torcon values in the 2 and 3 range. 3s are in that red. And that, again, includes up towards Orlando, towards the west coast, basically Interstate 4 back towards the south dealing with that. So, again, the scale goes all the way up to 10, so we're not near that, but we are on the scale. So we got to be careful and certainly pay attention and heed, again, any of those warnings that do try to come out. Heading back and checking in on some of those winds, they're starting to creep up here for you. 30-mile-per-hour winds gusting there around Tampa. Close to that in Fort Myers. We've seen the winds pretty gusty around Key West as well, close to 30 with sustained winds in the 15 to 20-mile-an-hour range. And it's not just there on the west coast. You head towards the eastern areas. Vero Beach right now, you're seeing gusty winds. 33-mile-per-hour wind gusts. And around Miami, winds are gusting close to 30, right around that 25-mile-an-hour range. And there is the center of the circulation there. The strongest of the winds would be right in that zone there on the east side. And again, some of that is trying to push its way ashore at this time. As far as when you can expect the tropical storm force winds, well, we're seeing a bit of that here for us. At least they're very close here in the western areas. But points inland, Thursday morning here from maybe Cedar Key towards Orlando, could be looking at tropical storm force winds setting in here by that time, and then beyond that, moving through the afternoon. But as this thing moves ashore, it should weaken very, very quickly. At least that's what is in the cards and what is forecast here. All right, so let's work our way on through, check the track. Again, moving on off towards the north and then turning northeastbound as we move through the overnight hours and into our Thursday. By Thursday afternoon, this thing may be well offshore and continuing to move in that direction away from the southeast coast. Let's take a look at some of the specifics. These are wind gusts and the forecast here for us. And as we head on through this afternoon, you see Tampa could be realizing 40 to even 50-mile-per-hour winds. Those may creep up to 50 and 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts here later on this evening and through the overnight hours. But the good news is this thing is moving quickly. So by the time we get into tomorrow morning, the winds are starting to calm down, or not calm down, but start to come down, moving that other direction. Tampa 35 to 40, down around Fort Myers. You're now looking at 15 to 20-mile-an-hour wind gusts. So quickly ramping down, and conditions really will start to improve from west to east as we move through the day on Thursday. By Thursday night, notice the wind speeds, at least the forecast wind gusts. I mean, in some cases, not really looking for any wind gusts. So rapidly improving conditions here for us. That is certainly a good scenario and a better situation when it comes to this system. Colleen?
Yeah, and Alex, I know the Sunshine State is just waiting for all of this to calm down and for the sun to come back out. But now let's detail out kind of some city timing and what to expect as some of these threats from Eta start to move closer. So we're talking about places like Tampa, Naples, Orlando, Jacksonville. What are going to be some of the challenges and when to expect them as Eta continues to close in on its second landfall for the state of Florida? So first off, here's the latest track, of course, making a landfall late tonight into tomorrow morning, just around Cedar Key, between Cedar Key and Spring Hill, and then taking a track up to the northeast, heading through Gainesville as well as into Jacksonville. So as Alex was detailing out, it's not just the west coast of Florida, but also the east coast of Florida that's going to see the effects of Eta. And even if it's weakening, it's still going to bring in the wind, the rain, the potential for flooding, and that severe weather threat. So for example, Tampa, you're really going to see those winds pick up overnight into Thursday morning, tropical storm force winds with additional rain to come, about 1 to 2 inches. And here's a look at what the winds are doing right now. So most of them are a little bit offshore, but as the center of Eta continues to track closer and closer to Florida, we're going to see these winds turn to an onshore flow. And so that's where we are concerned, a little bit of storm surge, anywhere from 2 to 4 feet around the Tampa Bay area. Either way, though, you're going to have those winds that are going to be pretty gusty all the way through about midday on Thursday before things start to die out by Thursday night. Sarasota, another place you could see some pretty gusty conditions as we head through tonight into Thursday morning. The tropical storm force winds, as well as another 3 to 5 inches of rain to come for Sarasota. Then as we stretch down a little farther south across the west coast of Florida, Fort Myers and Naples, you're going to have some winds up around 40 miles an hour with additional showers and thunderstorms rolling through. You'll have maybe a bit more of a break as some of those bands come through and then exit. But again, you've seen so much rain and now even more on the way as this goes through overnight into your Thursday morning. So just some messy weather before things start to clear up by the afternoon on Thursday, and then much better conditions as we go through the very end of the week. So rain still to come for the Fort Myers area, about an inch or so, and that also stretches into the central parts of Florida. Cedar Key, another example, tropical storm force winds tonight all the way through Thursday morning. Less than an inch of rain, not as concerned with the rain in Cedar Key, but again, the winds will be picking up, and we'll have to watch that closely, especially if you get under any of those bit of the pockets of rain that maybe could have some higher amounts in there. And then another place, Bradenton, Florida, we're looking at Wednesday evening through Thursday morning, those tropical storm force winds, and then they could see a few inches of rain. So a lot going on across Florida in the next 24 hours. Alex?
Hi, thanks, Colleen. Well, I'll tell you, if there is one thing that South Florida does not need, that would be more rain, right? Now, after weeks of it, another 8 inches of rain from Eta had just nowhere to drain, flooding neighborhood streets and some homes as well as businesses. So far this year, Fort Lauderdale has just over 78.5 inches of rain. That's more than 6.5 feet. And it's more than 21 inches above average for this time of the year. So some of these areas, again, don't need any more rain. Miami would be one of those. You've picked up nearly 6 inches from Eta. Rainfall this year totaling over 82 inches. Now, this now makes it the 7th wettest year on record. The current record is 89.33. That goes back to 1959. We still have a bit of the year to go, so can't rule out maybe getting to that mark. Now, we do have flood watches in place for southeastern Florida, West Palm Beach down towards Homestead, and then off towards the north and the west, flood watches and flash flood watches as well there, closer to where the center of the circulation is. But here in southeast Florida, that's where we have very, very wet conditions when it comes to soil moisture. A little drier in the southern tip and then working west and northbound. But of course, when you get into some of those heavy downpours, even though it may be a little drier in those locations, it still could lead to some flooding. We've got more on Eta next.
People were...
You're watching America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat. Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
Well, some more new video. Surf here, kind of rough at North Reddington Beach, Florida. This is courtesy of Eta, but the higher surf is drawing some surfers as Eta churns there in the Gulf. You oftentimes see that. But yeah, got to be careful getting out of those waters. It can, no doubt, be dangerous. I'll just get you live now to how things are faring for us. Tampa showing you, again, more of those crashing waves there for you. And again, we've been dealing with some gusty winds at times. They've been approaching 30 miles per hour there in and around Tampa. Sustained winds in the 10 to 15, close to 20 mile an hour range. So windy conditions, rainy conditions, that is basically the name of the game. St. Petersburg as well, dealing with that. You can see, again, tough to see, in fact, with some of the rain that's been coming down pretty steadily and heavily. We've got a pretty heavy batch of rain that's moving right on through. And so that's bringing in some pretty strong winds as well as some heavy downpours. All right, the latest when it comes to Eta, it is a tropical storm with 70 mile per hour winds. Pretty much with this latest advisory, not much has changed. Movement, as opposed to moving at 10 miles per hour, that's what it was. It's now moving at 12 miles per hour and a bit more off towards the north. So slightly faster. That's basically the only change here with this system since the last advisory from 3 hours ago. There on the east side is where we're finding the bulk of the nastiest of the weather. West of that, there's not a whole lot going on here for us. A lot of dry air is really taking over here, so you don't have a whole lot of activity there on the western edges and the western portion of the system. All the activity here in the east, and that's where we're finding some of those downpours coming right on in Sarasota, St. Petersburg, and back up towards getting close to Tampa. Now, as far as the alerts are concerned, the hurricane watches that were in place here in the western portions of Florida, those have been discontinued. They've been taken away. So no longer any hurricane watches, but we do have tropical storm warning still in place. You essentially have that anywhere you see that red showing up, Cedar Key, back down towards Port Charlotte, the Ocala area in there as well. So tropical storm conditions expected, anticipated in those zones. And then you get into the tropical storm watches, which actually has shaved a bit. That did go to the coast, but that has been shaved down now to now just include some of these interior counties just north of Ocala. So no longer anticipating at least the possibility for tropical storm conditions, I should say, off there to the east coast. So some better news there. But again, we'll still be talking some gusty conditions as the system moves across North Florida. Rapidly weakening, and that is anticipated here for us, making that landfall in sometime maybe late tonight, early tomorrow morning, somewhere in this zone, and then zipping across North Florida, rapidly weakening, and then as we head through Thursday night, moving away from the southeast coast. Here's what it looks like in terms of what we stand with the winds. As I mentioned, around Tampa, sustained winds right now, right around 20 miles per hour, but you're seeing gusts getting up around 30. Down around Fort Myers, 15 to 20 mile an hour sustained winds with gusts close to 30. And really the same as you slide all the way down towards the Keys. Key West right now, you're seeing winds that are right around 18 miles per hour with gusts close to 30. We've been watching, again, this area here on the east side, some heavier rain coming on into the coast with some stronger winds. And then also there's a zone where we see a bit of a band that's set up, and you can see certainly some heavier rains as well as a little bit of lightning showing up here. That's a little bit more of a burst of lightning showing up there, moving right on through the Keys, southern tip of Florida. And it's within that area that we have seen some occasional warnings coming out, whether in the form of severe warnings or tornado warnings. And we're certainly going to have to keep an eye on that as we head on through the rest of the day, because that risk will continue as the system moves closer and closer. Colleen?
Yes, and Alex, earlier we did speak to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who provided an overview of the situation from his perspective and the latest on preparations to respond after Eta makes landfall.
And there are wind gusts that are very strong, could even reach hurricane force. We also anticipate, we're already seeing in southwest Florida, some of the storm surge and the rising water levels. So people need to be on the lookout for flash flooding. Don't be venturing out into big areas of water. You could have power lines down. You're also looking at a landfall now potentially north of Tampa Bay area and the Hernando County region. Even a tropical storm will likely lead to vegetation and some other things with trees. So that's going to be an issue as well. We have not had major power outages yet, but we obviously think that that is going to happen. It may not be massive outages in any one spot, but it's going to be over a large portion of that west coast where there'll probably be some. So we're working hard to have supplies in there as soon as it's safe. And then we're also working with the utilities to make sure that they're in to be able to get the restoration. If you look at, I mean, you guys have been following this track. It's really been a crazy storm to watch. Yesterday morning when I got briefed, it was looking at a northern Gulf Coast impact in the Pensacola, Alabama, Mississippi region. And then obviously that's gotten revised now. We're looking at north of Tampa Bay. So folks are prepared. There are not any massive evacuations been ordered, but in some of the local communities, some low-lying areas in Manatee County and Hernando County, you are seeing voluntary evacuations. Not a lot of shelters have needed to be open yet, but if those are, we're obviously there to be able to help with any types of supplies that they need.
And of course, the Sunshine State is not going to be very sunny as we head into the next couple days. But at least this is going to be a quick hit as we head through tonight and tomorrow. And then hopefully by the end of Thursday into Friday, we'll have improving conditions. But there's a look at Tropical Storm Eta. It's going to be bringing storm surge to the western coast of Florida. Also rainfall, flooding, and even a severe threat. And this will continue as we head through this evening and overnight, even into central Florida. More on Eta right after this.
Birds may be the only creatures taking advantage of the beach on Anna Maria Island, Florida. This was shot this morning with showers as well as fog and steady 30-mile-per-hour winds, as well as gusts in the lower 40s. Weather alerts here read like a list of bad news. Yeah, tropical storm warning, we've got that. Tornado watch as well, flash flood watch, storm surge warnings, high surf advisories, and a rip current warning. You name it, we essentially have it. Maybe the only thing left would be like wintry weather at this point. Pretty crazy. So yeah, that's all thanks to Eta, which is getting closer and closer right now, moving northbound at about 12 miles per hour. It's a tropical storm, 70-mile-per-hour winds associated with it. Most of the worst weather is on the east side. You can see that showing up there for us. In fact, some of the worst has really gotten going here between around Tampa to St. Pete to Sarasota area as well. Tampa, Sarasota, just last checked the observation there. The winds are gusting up over 40 miles per hour and heavy rain is being reported. So really getting to the thick of things there. And we've been watching this band of rain and storms that's continuing to impact the portions of South Florida. Now, as we look at the water vapor imagery, boy, I tell you, there's a lot of dry air that's been here in the Gulf of Mexico. Some of that has gotten a chance to kind of work its way on into the center of the circulation. So that's why this thing is just kind of hanging on as best as it can, as opposed to seeing it really thriving. The conditions just aren't too ripe for that to take shape. So we should continue to see it weakening as it moves its way closer and closer to land, and then certainly as it makes its way onshore, as we move in late tonight, early tomorrow morning, and then zipping across North Florida, quickly weakening and then moving back out over the waters of the Atlantic, but zipping away. And so we will really start to see conditions improving as we head on through the day on Thursday. But before that happens, tropical storm conditions. In fact, that is anticipated. We're seeing some of that being realized now in terms of some of those tropical storm force winds. But anywhere in that red, we are looking for that potential, or not even potential, but expecting that. And then anywhere you see that yellow, all the way up towards the Big Bend, tropical storm watches that are in place, and a few counties here just north of Ocala that have watches as well, where we could see, at least there's the potential for tropical storm conditions. Right now, 20-mile-an-hour winds around Tampa, gusts up around 30, and we're essentially 15 to 20-mile-an-hour sustained winds with gusts right around 30 is what we're seeing generally. There's some higher areas here and there closer to where that center is trying to work its way on in. Outside of that, though, some downpours. We've been watching this line of storms continuing to spread its way across South Florida. Within that, occasionally we'll see a severe thunderstorm warning or even isolated tornado warning. And there's that risk for tornadoes where you see that red showing up for us basically for the next half an hour. There is a tornado watch, conditions favorable for tornadoes to spin up. And I'd imagine, Colleen, that we would probably see that warning maybe getting extended as we head on through this evening.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen so much activity already, and something to really take note of as this tropical system moves into Florida. Now, Florida, I know you feel like you're the only ones feeling the effects of Eta right now, but, you know, misery likes company. And so a lot of the southeast and the mid-Atlantic are going to get in on at least the heavy rain action as we have a high pressure system in the Atlantic. We have Tropical Storm Eta, and so that's funneling all this tropical moisture into the southeast and the mid-Atlantic. And then it's being pushed up against a front. And so with the lift of that front, all the tropical moisture, it spells tropical downpours and a lot of rain. So, of course, we do have flood alerts, flood watches, and flash flood watches out for much of the state of North Carolina, as well as into Virginia, even clipping Myrtle Beach in South Carolina as well. And some of this could be enhanced by the terrain in this area. The